Yes. Good evening. Welcome to Poets Corner here at Scarritt Bennett Center on this beautiful summer evening. We are glad you are here. I'm Donna Patterson, the lead for the Soul Work Programming, Spirituality and Arts programming here. And I am delighted to present our poet for this evening, Christina Stoddard. She is no stranger to this stage. She has been here before, and we are very glad to welcome her back. She's the author of HIVE, which was selected by Lucia Perillo for the 2015 Brittingham Prize in Poetry. And reading a little bit about it, it sounds like it is an interesting, intriguing story of a journey of a young woman. Her poems have appeared in various journals, including StorySouth, Diagrams, Boone River Poetry Review, and she's originally from Tacoma, Washington. Received her MFA at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. And then she also now is living in Nashville, is the editor, and I'm curious about this, of a scholarly journal in economics and decision theory. Okay. We're delighted to have Christina with us, so enjoy.
Thank you so much, Donna. One small thing, I'm actually no longer at the Economics Journal. I ended that position at the end of 2021, and this evening was rescheduled from December, so that's unfortunate. That's entirely my fault. You had an old bio. We weren't able to do it in December, but I'm grateful that you are having me back here in June. I want to first and always begin with gratitude. So thank you, all of you, for being here tonight, both in this auditorium and those who are tuning in online. I appreciate you hanging out with me for a while. I have to admit, I miss people. I have not been out socially in public a lot during the COVID-19 pandemic, and you are my community, and I miss you. I've missed this, and I'm grateful again to Scarritt Bennett for having me tonight. Scarritt Bennett is a precious part of Nashville, and I'm thankful for the opportunities I've had to participate in their programs over the years, whether it's literary, art exhibits, social justice programs. If you are not familiar with Scarritt Bennett Center, definitely check out their website, check out their programming. There's something for everyone. I want to thank Donna for that generous introduction and also for arranging everything about tonight and making it happen. I would also like to thank Joyce Soul, who was the original energy and engine behind Poets Corner and the reason that any of us are here tonight. If I recall correctly, Joyce started Poets Corner in the summer of 2010. So we're on year 12. That's very impressive for a reading series. And so many thanks to Joyce for seeing the opportunity for poetry to be shared, to uplift us and challenge us, and for keeping the series going. Tonight, I want to do something a little different. As Donna mentioned, I published a book in 2015 called HIVE, and many people who are watching tonight have heard me read from this book quite a lot over the last 7 years. And so I, for one thing, thank you for that. Bless you for always showing up for me. And I appreciate that so deeply. But tonight, since I've been underground for 2 years, I thought I would share some things that I've been working on more recently. New work. Some of them are poems that no one has ever heard before. Some of them are very new. They might not be entirely finished, but I'm going to give it a shot. So we'll get going. The first one is called Drowning in White. I have too many teeth inside my tiny mouth, so they pull them out one by one. My mother counts with me backwards until there are reckless feathers floating down to line the parlor of my sleeping heart. I go to unbandage the eyes of Lazarus, rejoicing, for I'm going to take his place. And he gives me a pearl torn from the mouth of its keeper. On a cliff of salt, I put my voice into every shell, so my children will follow it home. I am blind as an egg. And the lamb, the lamb, the lamb, he will take years to devour it all. If you have read my book, HIVE, you'll know this already, but I was raised in the Mormon church. I do not belong to that church anymore for a number of reasons, like that church's history and policies of discrimination against LGBTQ people, but the whole time I was growing up, we heard stories about visitation from ancestors. Mormons do not exactly believe in guardian angels per se, but they do believe that your loved ones in the afterlife are looking out for you. And it is entirely possible that the dead will show up with a message or to intervene or to tell you something you need to know. So that's this next poem. It starts with a family story where my grandmother, who died when I was 4 and way before my cousin was ever born, my grandmother appeared to my cousin in a situation of life or death. The poem is also about an argument between two lovers, one of whom is mocking and dismissive of the other's faith. Afterlife and in between. When you ask again if I believe in ghosts, insisting I commit, I answer with a vision my cousin had 2 summers ago in Canyonlands. She was beaten by a prisoner on work release, her voice disabled, drifting out, when our grandmother, 16 years gone, appeared above her, solid as the trees. Without an ounce of tenderness, my grandmother said, "Get up, girl." My cousin does not remember crawling to the road, but a minivan found her stretched out across its lane. A family, wrong-turned, in an unmarked branch of the park. The driver used my cousin's walkie to guide the helicopter, and she woke from the coma saying our grandmother's name. While you half listen, I can see you arranging your argument, the steely pearl of your intellect. But my love, you have never lain bleeding on any ground. And there are things I knew before I knew you, which is why I never told you what happened last spring, the week the dogwoods bloomed, a few nights after some god's hand fished inside me for the heart that was growing there and plucked it out. In grief, I opened my eyes to a little girl, 4 or 5, standing quietly beside our bed. She held my hand. If I thought you would listen, I would tell you she was almost ours, that before she vanished, she told me her name. I do believe in ghosts, at least in that form of them. This poem arose from a news story I heard about experiments in epigenetics. Epigenetics, anybody know what that is? I don't expect you would. Epigenetics is the study of how your environment and things that happen to you personally, especially as a child, can change the way that various genes get turned on and off and expressed during your life. And there are all sorts of ways that can manifest for better or for worse. So sometimes a gene that you could really benefit from gets overridden by external events. Like, for example, there are a lot of studies showing that a childhood of poverty or instability actually changes children's brains. It makes them prone to anxiety disorders. It makes them, it makes it harder for them to develop commitments, and they tend to have more fear of abandonment, those sorts of things. Some of that's psychological, but then some of it is genetic predispositions, more autoimmune disease, things like that. So there's even evidence that bad stuff that happened to your ancestors in the past can cause changes in genetic expression that carry through to future generations, like you. And I find that absolutely fascinating, and that is the subject of this poem. The experiment that it opens with really happened, is real. You can look it up if you wish. It's called Rats. A team in a lab trained rats to be terrified of the smell of cherry blossom, which took electric shocks and patience. It worked so well that when they bred the rats and piped a slight cherry scent into the baby's cage, each new generation trampled one another in panic. A successful corruption in the code. I have felt something like this. My own ribosomes spliced for 200 years with fear and obedience, a reverence that I now struggle to leave burning behind me like a field. And when I finally gave in to the vow a man asked me to make, the weight of saying yes pressed down on my throat until it closed. In dreams, my pioneer mothers turned me from side to side to assess my teeth and measure my hem. They followed a prophet over the plains until their shoes wore through, killing as they went and still calling themselves godly. Now that I am making a covenant worth 1,200 miles of shallow grass and shallow graves and waist-high prairie grass, all my rag-wrapped ghosts rise up from the banks of the North Platte and the Sweetwater to offer best wishes, to tell me that heaven is mine again. But this ring I've agreed to is a bullying little prince. It yanks out my hair. Its pronged cathedral clogs with bread dough when I punch down the dome for a second resurrection. It slyly etches its likeness in granite and glass, and I have never been careful with my hands. I can't stop clawing at its endless disaster, the flesh underneath growing welted and raw. From the kitchen window, I can see our twin cherry trees, their branches just beginning to flower. I think in this one, the only thing you need to know is that a swift is a kind of small bird. And also, I guess that, as Donna pointed out, I'm from the Pacific Northwest, from Western Washington. Evergreen. I want my child born to glaciers, as I was, born to the seams in rock that only water can make. I want her to climb pines so high they whisper to the swifts. My girl will learn to breathe underwater, flick her wrist to reveal its delicate webbing. None of these open sight lines, none of this scrub and juniper. She's sure to inherit my love of ruin, bring forth earthquakes with the echo in her throat. I'll put ginger on her tongue, take her to markets full of cinnamon and silk. Feed her sockeye on a bed of crushed ice. I want my daughter born under the kind of mountain that punches through the derelict sky. She'll know the bite of spiked boots on ice. Enough fog to hide her from enemies while I teach her to aim for their eyes. She'll have my brackish hair, my strong legs, her father's immoderate shoulders. He will teach her to write in code, to scale a fish in 2 long strips. I will show her which fruits have stones to suck, how to manage a fire near open water, and when the darkness comes, how to crow at its weight. I like alternate histories. I also like asking what-if questions. So here's one. In this poem, I was imagining the scene at the end of Romeo and Juliet, where Juliet realizes that Romeo's taken poison and he's dead. So if you recall, she's grief-stricken, she takes Romeo's dagger, she stabs herself. But I always thought, even when I read this this play as a freshman in high school, I thought, why does she have to die? What if Romeo hadn't had the dagger on him? In the play, he's got a sword, and right before Juliet wakes up, he had fought with Paris. So it's either, chance or habit that he had a secondary weapon on him. So what if he didn't? What would Juliet's life look like? And I sort of surprised myself as I went through that thought experiment, because at first I thought she'll have a great life. And then I realized, no, she probably really wouldn't. She would grieve for a really long time. And so this is what my imagining of what Juliet's grief would look like. Like Juliet reviving. What if there had been no dagger, no escape before the monk traipsed in, and this girl who wants only what's lost, this girl who got left behind, has no choice but to howl and claw until her voice gives out? What if she has to bathe and dress and lace her shoes for the rest of her unaccompanied summers? Embroider cushions she does not want, sit straight-backed at tables set with china and silver, entertain and chit-chat and occupy her time, but all the while she cannot keep from freezing without her lover's ghost folded around her like ardent wings, cannot stop reliving the moment she first saw him, the cut of his jaw igniting the room like phosphorus, his desire violent as radiation, as if he had created everything from his own hands, his own mouth. Which is why every time she gets near water, she tries and tries. She pins her dress with a rock and prays. But always she is found. Someone ruins it. They pull her out and beg. And now I think it's time for a couple of breakup poems. This one, called Understudy for the Ingenue. You waited too long, lover. I haven't seen you since the cinema when you thought you'd snagged me in amber. But of course, this isn't that story. It's the next scene. The one where I'm caught in your drawing room with a poison pin in my lapel and you hold me under until I'm willing to confess. This is when you learn I'm wired like a bomb's ticking skin. No help for its sorry squander. You and I both know the hasp of the ribs can be opened, and whatever slips through must be the soul. So come over here while there's still light. I'm bare as a cupboard, and I'm sure you'd like to taste my salt. If you ever held to a god, then hold me too. Soon you'll trade me for another pair of pretty wrists. But first, you're mine. First, pay me in something I can use. So one of the things I noticed when I got out of a very long-term relationship of years and years was it was weird to tell stories about what I'd done and where I'd been, vacations I'd taken, concerts I'd seen. You end up saying my ex a lot, and it gets awkward, especially when you're dating again. Nobody wants to hear about your ex that much. And so this poem was me trying to grapple with that fact and sort of having to make those little micro adjustments to my own history in a way that didn't feel like I was being dishonest. Although I would argue that the speaker in the poem is definitely crossing that line sometimes. But this is something that had just never really happened until then. And I'm happily married now, so this is a bit of an older poem, or an older idea for a poem. But this is called Still Life with Pronoun and Scalpel. With this blade, I must trim you from the meat of my stories. Now I will stand next to a genderless friend as we watch Prince strip Little Red Corvette down to one unplugged guitar. I water down the weekend we spent on Topsail Island until it's me, a mixtape, and an indefinite pronoun riding shotgun. Every plural becomes singular. No one else remembers the motel room in Columbus, whose reek of secondhand smoke and lavender potpourri would not wash from my hair. It is like tearing the ligaments that bind my arm to its socket. Look how biography dangles useless at my side. I've got to dodge the discrepancies. Stop talking so much. Lean away from where your collarbone used to be. I'm re-recording those years and saving the sound bites. Let me believe it can be clean. I keep having that nightmare where all my teeth fall out when I tap them, which is supposed to mean I've allowed things to slip from my mouth that I should have held in. My neighbor says that a dream of losing teeth means you are telling lies, and I grin back with empty gums. These revisions are labored like you're breathing when we climb Chimney Rock, which of course is a fiction because I was there alone, no lover on the radar at all. Thanks. Do you ever, or have you ever, gotten so angry at a loss that all you can do is just be furious for days or weeks or months or even years? This poem was written out of that kind of mood. The unfairness of losing someone that you love. And the fact that it's not okay, it'll never be okay, it's just something that happened that you have to adjust to and rebuild parts of your life around, but it never stops feeling unfair. It's called sheer. I want a haircut that can win a bar fight. I want a haircut that will throw my things on the lawn so I can finally get out of here. A gale is tearing at all the shutters in this house, and I want a haircut that feels like that howling. I need everyone to know I'm coming for them because I have nothing left to lose. I'm tossing the glass jars on my vanity and the plastic comb I drag across my scalp. Because we all expect to grow old and soft, and some of us just won't. I want a haircut that can stop time so I can give myself one more hello from her. One more of everything before she climbs into the car that will not make it back. There is money in my wallet, and I want a haircut that will raise an army. If it worked for that girl and her ships, then it can work for me. I want a haircut that can bring down a plague and settle a bet, that can write its own love sonnet and pitch a script. I'm so tired of having this face, boring as a faucet. Where's the pizzazz? I want so much more than what I'm getting. My fury bursts like a galaxy. I want a haircut that can call God's bluff. This one is a little gentler. It's called Summer Somewhere. In those days, I hated my softness, but I gathered light everywhere. I stored it under my bed or inside my sleeve, everything in me homespun and purer than I wanted to admit. I was young and curious and afraid, and I believed in revelation with a capital R. Everything I wore was handed down, thrown away before I could own it. Covered in shame, like a floor-length sack. I thought if I could just get on an airplane, everything would happen. I'd been waiting so long, flush-faced and feeling my life dry out like sap on bark. Goodbye to the house with the apple tree that won't grow. Good riddance to the city that smelled of sulfur and smoke. I wanted to be anywhere but there. I danced away from the ones who called me mouthy, like they could punish me for it. Ran far and fast on my skinny feet, right to the edge of a ripening field. Something was sure to come soon. I just had to hold my breath. Okay, and now we're going to get into a couple of very new poems. Really, really new, like 1 or 2 months old. So does anyone here like the History Channel? I love the History. Okay, I see some nods. Yes, I love the History Channel. Vikings, Forged in Fire, all the shows about engineering and modern marvels. But my favorite thing I've ever seen on the History Channel is a show called Life After People. Has anybody ever heard of that one? It's from 2007 or 8, so it's old by now. But I love it. So the premise of the show, Life After People, is that in one single moment, everyone on Earth vanishes at the same time. All human beings just, bam, gone. Nobody left. And in that event, what would happen to the world? What would happen to all of the things we've created and cultivated and made? And these are fascinating questions. And some of the answers will surprise you. And I wrote this poem because the ultimate answer they come to on the show is pretty staggering. There is one human-made monument that will last the longest amount of time, more than any other, more than Mount Rushmore, more than the Great Wall of China. And anybody want to guess what it would be? No. It is the Confederate monument at Stone Mountain. Yes, I heard someone in the audience say, of course. Yes, right there with you. So the Confederate memorial at Stone Mountain will outlast everything else. It will still be there more than 10,000 years after the sudden, rapture or disappearance of every human being on Earth. And that hit me hard, especially because we have a lot of open questions right now about what we're going to do with Confederate monuments. And in Tennessee in December, we all know the I-65 Nathan Bedford Forrest statue finally came down, thank goodness. I don't actually remember if the Forrest statue if there's still a bust of Forrest in the state capitol. I know in December, January there was talk of getting rid of it, and I'm not sure if they did. But again, these are things worth thinking about, because the show Life After People, the attitude it takes is that the decay of the world, to an extent, is procedural. And I got to thinking about, well, why can't we do more of that now? So here we go. If every human being on Earth disappeared, and there's an epigraph that says History Channel, Life After People. After the skyscrapers fill with feral cats on the hunt, after the Shroud of Turin blooms with mold, and every frame of celluloid dissolves, after the immortality drive plummets back to Earth in a fireball, and the Astrodome collapses like a cake from the oven, after the Eiffel Tower corrodes into iron filings, the keystone will drop from the St. Louis Arch like an overripe plum. After Christ the Redeemer's soapstone body topples face first down Corcovado, after wind has sanded Rushmore 3/5 to blankness, and the last grains of the Great Wall blow away in a breeze, 3 traitors will still crown Stone Mountain unless we can't save everything, but we don't have to keep this. I won't lie, it will hurt. Those cowards are carved deep, and their threat is meant to last. But there's no such thing as a lost cause, and the Nobel Peace Prize was named for a man who invented explosives. Let's put good old Alfred's work to use and blow up the lie before we disappear. All it would take is dynamite and a little time, the spark of desire. I highly recommend that you go check out this series. It's not that many episodes, and it's on History Channel, but it also might be on YouTube, I think. So it's fascinating. There's a lot more, obviously, than I could put in a poem, and I love it. It's a really interesting thought experiment. So speaking of the end of the world, in a way, this next one is about climate change. And it's called Letter to the Polar Bear Grizzly Bear Hybrids of the Future. We're really sorry. Well, maybe we aren't, because otherwise you wouldn't exist. But a lot of us feel bad about the whole thing. Climate change, the melting ice that drove one of your parents south, while deforestation drove the other parent north. That's simplifying things, of course, but that's basically what happened. The first one of you was discovered by shooting it. And when the hunter saw the body up close, they thought, what a weird-looking bear. Proving again that a gun is not a tool for the inquisitive. Did you know zoologists are trying to call you Pisleys? They're trying to make Pisleys happen, and I sincerely hope they fail, because you deserve better than that. Pisley is a deeply unpleasant rain, or maybe a drinking game, and it kind of feels like a diss when a rival team messes up hard, like, man, you got Pisleyed. Not what we're going for. The other option is apparently to call you growler bears, which is almost worse. It sounds like how you would describe thrash metal or the sound of a garbage disposal. Whichever name wins out, there's going to be a lot of memes. I apologize in advance for how many of them will make fun of your hairy feet. Fame is a difficult burden, or so I'm told. A study predicts 30% more polar grizzly hybrids in the next 30 years. Some will say it's a sign of the end, but when is the end ever not coming? Along the way, there be monsters. Hey, did you know that cartographers used to put fake place names on their maps so if anyone copied their work, they would know? I've always loved that fact. Anyway, you poor Pisleys, or growlers, or whatever. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for your bootleg being. I don't know if you are the future. We'll just have to see how things work out. But I hope you're okay, living your best life in none of it, if that's even a real place. Sounds like the kind of trick a cartographer would try to pull. One more thing I should tell you. When humans see something strange, we call it providence if we like it, an abomination if we don't. You might want to stay in the Arctic if you can. I need to go now. There's a glass with melting ice making a puddle on my side table, and I don't have a coaster. Wouldn't want to ruin it by leaving it too long. As you might guess by now, I read a lot of like Scientific American, and I follow the Smithsonian on Twitter, and I think that's where I saw that article on the polar bear grizzly bear hybrids. They are very strange looking, and unfortunately, because these hybrid bears did not evolve to suit a particular biological need, they end up with the worst of both worlds. They have the tiny polar bear head and polar bear teeth, but they can't live in super icy places. So polar bear teeth, they are actually not very good at chewing meat, even though there's this thing, we all hear stories about polar bears chasing humans up in the Arctic. Polar bears evolved to eat blubber. So they can kill you and they can chase you and maul you, but they can't chomp you the way a grizzly can. So unfortunately, the Pisley bears, growler bears, end up with the teeth made for eating blubber, but because they are not fully compatible with like an icy environment, hair-wise, fur-wise, they end up having to live in a place where they're supposed to eat meat, and it doesn't work very well. So the future of these bears is unknown. All we know is that there's probably going to be more of them. And weirdly enough, they have also had a couple generations now of these bears, and they found that the bears can reproduce, which is very rare in a hybrid animal. Like we all know, donkeys cannot, or mules cannot which is it, donkeys or mules? I always get it, mules? Okay, mules cannot reproduce, but these bears can. So nobody knows what that means for the future. And here is another poem about an animal. I'm about to Google Argiope spider. And I know I probably shouldn't, because if I do this, I will never sleep real sleep again. But curiosity is like that, isn't it? A hunger that drives us first to the river and then to wade in with all our clothes on, just to see what it feels like, to see how heavy the cotton becomes, how easy it is to drown. Argiope spiders have colorful abdomens, it turns out, sunny yellow and nearly cheerful, really quite pretty, and I'm surprised to think I could not squish this spider. I would have a hard time hurting it. We're chemical rigged to protect whatever we find beautiful, especially the shimmering human things, the lovers and brothers and sisters, who have far fewer legs than the Argiope spider, but are just as colorful, especially in language, like this girl Jessica, who taught me to cuss in 4 tongues one summer under the arbor in her backyard, an arbor that, to be honest, was glutted with spiders that spun above our exploring mouths. And sometimes beautiful things betray us. The way you think you and a spider have formed a truce, each keeping to your corners of the room. But one night you awaken to find it crawling across your arm. There's courtship in a web, an imperative in the quiet silk, in the perfect execution of a plan. Moreover, a plan I have no language for, the patient hurling of a small body across the dark over all that absence and doubt, all the while building something slender to cross it. Just 2 poems left. And this next one was brought about by, I had to go to the store and buy my husband deodorant. He wasn't with me, and so I had to search through all the racks of Old Spice looking for the kind he wanted. And it had been years since I'd really done that. And I don't know if any, it's mostly women in the audience here at the auditorium. And so I don't know if you've had to do this, but the names of men's deodorant are really violent. Like, have you encountered this? Yes, somebody's nodding. Okay. And I started thinking about that. I was like, why is it that the first thing you put on in the morning as a man is, or as someone who wants to wear a masculine scent, is violence? Why is that point of order number 1 after you get out of the shower? And I wrote this poem called Cool Sport Rush. Anytime you hear something that sounds, a phrase that sounds weird in the poem, that's an implied deodorant flavor or scent. They're capitalized in the poem, but I know you can't see that. Cool Sport Rush. I'm no expert on masculinity, but I know the smell of it on someone's armpits. It's like a swaggering colossus of self-destruction, and it goes by names like Shark Puncher War Games and Don't Say Gay Assault Rifle. Okay, I made those up, but the real ones are in the same club. Bear Glove, Wolf Thorn, Kraken Guard. They sound like castles in Game of Thrones. And Night Panther, written as one word, sleek and midnight cursed. Anyone who picks Night Panther off the shelf is not out to kill you with kindness. A deodorant called Swagger is a real thing. And I almost appreciate the simplicity, the promise of it. At least I know never to expect an orgasm from someone whose signature scent is the lime and cedarwood of overconfidence. Most men I've met cannot see how much they are loved, or they think being loved makes them weak. They keep putting on layers of faceless rage and never wash it off. One of my brothers has tried to kill himself 3 times. In his case, it's because of God, who is full of bad advice on what a man should be. I don't know how to convince anyone how few of their fears about themselves are real. I can barely convince myself. Meanwhile, without better options, we all find ourselves at the store holding a stick of high-endurance fresh, while a product team in Iowa debates whether victory should smell more like juniper or eucalyptus. Here's what I know. No amount of cool sport rush or adrenaline thunderstud is going to make the world make sense. And everyone feels unclean. And I will end with a poem about hope. Always good to end on an upbeat. Okay. Did you know that at one point in time, every month had an Ides? You know, we have Beware the Ides of March. Thanks for someone in the audience says yes, they knew. Ides of March are famous, but in that era, the Ides, every month had an Ides. So this is called Ides of July. In the summer, I can't help feeling I was meant for a more beautiful life, for deeper water and brighter stars, shorter sorrows and perfect teeth. Patience is not my strong suit. It's the Ides of July, which means another June has slipped its hitch, and this constant loss makes me want to tie the God particle to a chair and question it with pliers. I am well aware that everybody dies, but I don't want to think about it for a few thousand years. I'd rather dance with a bottle of tequila in my hand, hair cascading to my waist like it did in high school. I'd even go for an awkward foxtrot in the gymnasium with the pastor's son, whose black curls I so longed to touch. I only got as far as his shoulder, which isn't even a base. Maybe I can learn to be happy with a paper bag of peaches and a picnic in the shade. Though wouldn't it be nice to buzz some blue angels overhead just to give the scene some heat? I want a little danger, a little forbidden love. A good ghost story, and in the morning, 2 eggs fried in real bacon grease, biscuits with lard, the works. After dinner, hand me a bottle of whatever's cold. Let's live while we're alive. Let's get drunk and try to catch knives. Let's rewire the house with the electricity still on. Forget the treadmills and run someplace real. I can't see the relief in going quietly. I'll follow a neon sign that says now, 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 because today I have a mouth that can still shape words and kiss like nothing you've ever had. So let's do it. Let's hop a boxcar and ride all night. Let's skinny dip in the lake while its reedy fingers reach for our ankles. Let's go find some horses to ride, bareback if we can. Yes, sorrows wait like silverfish behind the baseboards. But today, they can't take the room. It's ours and only ours. The beautiful life we always wanted might collapse in time, like starlight. But look, it's not too late. We can race it to the end. Thank you so much for listening.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, we have time.
Okay, so when does the next book come out?
Oh.
When is this stuff gonna be written by?
A couple of these poems, 2 maybe, are out in journals online that can be read. But goodness, that really is the question, isn't it? When is the next book coming out? I don't know. It's always a combo of the effort you put in and sheer dumb luck, honestly. Getting a publication contract nowadays is, yeah, kind of a crapshoot. Publishing is going through a weird time in the pandemic. We haven't lost too many poetry presses that I can think of. A number of journals and magazines have shut down, but I can I can't think of any poetry presses we've lost, which is good. But, print runs or their financial capacity shrinks. So really the only part of that equation that I can control is my own work and getting things ready. And that is something I am always working on. I write every week, not every day. I actually don't believe in writing every day. For me, that is a recipe to just beat myself up and feel bad. Because, we have lives, right? But always keeping the work going. And I'm especially grateful that I got to share these poems tonight because, again, a lot of them, you are the first people who have ever heard them. I've been writing them in my, little room on my laptop and never really quite sure how they would play out loud. So, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
You reference teeth a lot. Is there a reason for that?
Not a conscious one. I also realized how many ghosts show up, and that's another thing about picking sort of a group of poems to read. You realize that they start speaking to each other in interesting ways, and that then becomes an indication that you are making something book-shaped, right? Things that weave through. Teeth, I have a complicated relationship with teeth. The first poem I read is actually about when I was in elementary school, 2nd or 3rd grade. I inherited my mother's tiny jaw and my father's teeth, and they actually had to pull 6 permanent teeth. So I have fewer adult teeth than I'm supposed to, because they wouldn't fit in my face. And then I had braces and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have any deeper reason than that.
Okay.
But thank you. I actually hadn't noticed that. I noticed the ghosts. So thank you for pointing that out. Now I know.
There were pearls, too.
Pearls, yes.
How has your writing surprised you in the past 2 years?
Oof.
Would you repeat the question?
Yes, the question was, how has your writing surprised you in the last 2 years? Oh, that's a big one. One of the biggest surprises is that in the first, I'll say 4 or 5 months of the pandemic, I wrote nothing. And that's not normal for me. I wrote nothing. I was in pure survival mode. Members of my household are high risk with regard to any disease that would affect, the internal organs, less respiratory, more organ failure risk. And so I was just absolutely curled up in a ball of survival mode. So I didn't write at all. And then when I did, I didn't want to talk about myself as much. That was a surprise. So a lot of the poems I read tonight are things that were inspired by things I read or that are looking at the world. And HIVE as a book, my first book, was very much my story. It was very much about my adolescence and growing up. And I at least for a little while, lost the desire to talk more about me and my experience. I think possibly it was the pandemic made me look at the world again and sort of snap to attention in that way. Thank you for the question.
Well,
Anybody
thank
else?
you.
All right. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for coming. And this has been, wow, amazing.
Thank you.
What a gift. Thank you so much. And for those here and everyone online, we have Poets Corner once a month on Thursdays here on the campus in the Harambe Auditorium in Fondren Hall, and we would love to have you join us anytime and support us. This is a program that we offer for free, and so if you want to make a donation to our programming, we would appreciate it. And I do appreciate you mentioning Joy.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's watching.
I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.